Hey everyone, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
I'm sorry we started late. We're gonna let everybody get connected and get organized real quick. We are so excited to be here with Mary today.
Yeah, so good to see some familiar names.
All right, I think
This is
everybody's.
really fun.
Have you done a lot of events for this book so far?
Only a few virtual ones. I mean, it came out like the hard copy came out the night that it came out March 11th, which everyone can remembers that was right when everything shut down.
Yeah.
So I had like a lot of in-person events planned, and they all got canceled, and then none of them turned into virtual events because I think none of us remember like how
We
long
weren't
it was
quite
going to
there yet.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, this book kind of fell between the COVID crash.
Well,
Fell
I'm
into the
glad
COVID
you're willing
cracks.
to come talk to us about it because we're excited about it. So,
Yeah, me too. So I really haven't, and that's one reason this is so fun to be able to do.
well, I think everyone is on for now, so I'll keep letting people on if anybody's got stuck or anything. I sent out an email that said we were running a little behind, so hopefully everyone's all set with that. So I'm Jackie with Hub City Bookshop, and we're here with Mary Adkins, who is the author of Privilege. I am working from home today, so I don't have a copy handy to show everybody, but I will put a link to it in the chat, and it's a gorgeous book. And we have these beautiful signed copies from Mary, so couldn't be happier about that. So let me give a little introduction for Mary, then she's going to talk about her book, and please feel free to put questions in the chat window for her. She would love to have questions from the audience about writing or about the book or about other books that she's written, whatever you'd like to ask questions about. So Mary Adkins is the author of the novels When You Read This, which was an Indie Next Pick and a Best Book of 2019 by Good Housekeeping and Real Simple. Privilege was a Today.com Best Summer Read and New York Post Best Book of the Week. And her book Palm Beach is available for pre-order. That's coming up. Her books have been published in 13 countries, and her essays and reporting have appeared in the New York Times, The Atlantic, Slate, and more. A graduate of Yale Law School and Duke University, she teaches storytelling for the Moth worldwide and creative writing both online and in her hometown of Nashville. And we're so excited she's willing to take the time to talk to us today. Thanks for coming on, Mary.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your book and how it was writing it? We know a little bit about publishing it since it came out last March, but
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So this is my second novel. So Privilege, this is the paperback edition, which came out about 2 months ago. And it's my second novel. My first novel was When You Read This, which came out a year earlier in 2019. And I started writing Privilege before I had even sold When You Read This. I was looking for an agent, for a literary agent for When You Read This, which is how you sell a book. You get a literary agent and they pitch it to publishers. And I hadn't found one yet. And I thought, well, I'll just start, maybe start a new book. And the idea for Privilege really came to me like kind of fully formed, which sounds really weird, but it was very different than the experience of When You Read This, my first book. My first book, it was years of kind of piecing together what the story really was and who the characters were, and a lot of trial and error and different drafts with different characters. There were major characters in that book who got cut along the way. Privilege was really different. I was living in New York, in my neighborhood in Queens, and I remember having the idea for the novel. I was just walking down Steinway Street, which is this major street in my neighborhood, and thought of it. I just thought of oh, there's this college student and there's a sexual assault case on campus. And I want to tell the story of that sexual assault case from 3 different perspectives, all women's perspectives. And even the title, I don't remember if it was that exact moment, but it was right around then. The title Privilege just came to me because I was picturing it as a story about how mainly financial privilege plays into justice, who has money, where the money is. But but then I also thought it would be fun to explore other aspects of privilege too. So it was it was a really different experience for me, the way that this novel came about. Because at that point it was basically like a kind of just like channeling the story. When I was writing it, it was like just writing down, this story that was coming out. And it did change a lot over the, of course, like when you're revising, things change for sure. But certain key attributes never changed. The story is told from three perspectives: Annie, B, and Stasia. And those three characters were always the three characters. They were always the three women who told the story. It was always a story of a sexual assault on this campus. It was always called privilege. Like those things were really there from the start. So that was an interesting thing for me, because my first novel didn't really come out that way.
Thank you for sharing about it with us. I was going to ask you a little bit about the three characters and why you picked those three particularly. I also loved how I think it was B's perspective, the one who is the advocate for Tyler. So
Yeah.
you kind of get like a little bit of Tyler's perspective, maybe, but you're still sticking with these three women. So what made you pick these three?
Yeah. I went to law school. And I did love law school. I was not a lawyer for very long. I was a lawyer for less than a year. But I did really like law school and have always been really interested in law. And when I was in law school, practiced. I was a law student, but in Connecticut, where I was in law school, law students, as long as they were supervised, could actually represent clients. So we had a clinic, the domestic violence clinic, as part of my law school, which I was the director of for a couple of years. And so I actually had like these domestic violence cases. And so I did a fair amount of, I mean, over the years, I had several dozen clients who I was working with on kind of like gender-based violence stuff. And so even though I stopped being a lawyer, I was still really fascinated by that and wanted to bring a lot of what I was grappling with, like drawing from that experience, bring that to the book. And so there's a student in the book, B, who is what's called a student advocate, meaning she is like the student who is there to support a fellow student when they find themselves in the campus judicial process. So like the grievance process around like a sexual assault case on campus. And it doesn't mean that she's the lawyer. She's not like representing her fellow student, but she's there to be supportive. She is there to kind of observe what's going on though. Like it, and this is drawn from research I did around like real roles that exist on universities now. Like there really are these kind of positions, like student advocate positions, where if people find themselves in a when I say a campus judicial process, I mean like if you are assaulted on campus, you can bring you don't have to just rely on resources off campus. You could go to the police, you could try to go through like an actual court, but a lot of times that's a really hard thing to take on and to be successful at, especially with sexual assault, where it's like evidence is an issue, like where like bringing physical evidence to support your case. So a lot of times what people will do is report the incident to campus authority. So like to the Title IX office on campus or the sexual assault support center, and they have different names, but like bring it there. And then the university itself will have a process for dealing with that. It's different from the law, like it's not criminal. It's not even civil. It's not court. It's not actually a court, but it is a judicial process in the sense that like they do fact finding, like they try to figure out what happened and they write up a report and they make they make a decision, an actual decision is made that can have really pretty severe repercussions for people. Like people can get expelled, people can get suspended, people can be put on different kinds of probation or nothing, you know. And so in these processes there are go back to my original point, student advocates. And student advocates are at some schools. And B is a student advocate in this book because she's really interested in law. She like considers herself, she's going to be a pre-law student. She wants to become a public defender. And so this is going to be her first foray into that. I really wanted this particular perspective because I thought it could illuminate the like the struggle of feeling obliged to support a point of view that you may not personally agree with.
Right.
Like, you know, I think as her story goes on, she doesn't know if she actually believes what, you know, what Tyler's what his version of things is or not, but she still feels like ethically obliged to be his, you know, support. And so I thought that was an interesting perspective to explore through B.
It really is. And it sounds like the three characters all have a different perspective and it's all a little bit conflicting. And you're really kind of exploring all aspects of the issue. Is there anything in particular that you're hoping for readers to take away? Maybe not a particular character that they should agree or disagree with, but like a overall takeaway from the book that you were hoping for.
Yeah, I think one big takeaway that I guess I was really interested in readers thinking through is how we have like an incentive to believe, how a lot of times what we believe is what we really kind of need to believe in order to survive, or maybe that's putting it pretty dramatically, but like what we have an incentive to believe. So for example, so another character, Stasia, she's kind of dating the guy who is accused of committing the assault and did commit the assault. She's dating him. And I wanted to include her perspective because I found myself like, especially, I mean, I was working on this book during the Me Too movement. Like I was writing it when all of that stuff was coming out. And I found myself thinking a lot about what it would feel like to be like a woman who was really close to one of these men who was being accused of like really terrible things, like whether it's a wife or a partner or a sister or a mother. Like what is it like, especially if you didn't see it coming, like especially if you really thought this was a person who wasn't capable of something like that, to hear it, like what is that? What was that experience? What is that cognitive dissonance like? Because on one hand, I'm sure you know, I was sure you'd want to believe the person that you're close to, and you'd want to give them the benefit of the doubt and believe the best in them. But on the other hand, when you have, I mean, you're kind of in a role of decision maker yourself when you have like evidence to the contrary come at you, and you have to face this question of like, is this person not who I thought they were? And what is my role? Like, who should I support in this? And how do I, you know, especially if it's like a family member or someone you're committed to, like, how do I remain committed to and supportive of this person while also acknowledging like the problematic thing that's happened? And I just thought that was like such an interesting and undertold story around sexual assault. And so Stasia, I mean, she's not related to Tyler. She's kind of loosely dating him without him calling it that. But she still faces that cognitive dissonance of like, oh no, I thought this person is supposed to be great, and I can't reconcile him being great with him being a rapist. Like that, those two things don't work together. And so I thought that was an important thing to take away. Like what, not in a sort of like, you know, reader, like there is a right way for her to respond or not. Like I wasn't thinking of it in a didactic way like that. It's more just like, what is one possible way that someone could deal with that? And what might it be like to be in that position? You know, just raising the question, I think.
Yeah, I really haven't come across a lot of books that think about it from that person's perspective. So I really thought that was an interesting inclusion for this. And especially because she's not a student at the college, right?
Right, exactly.
She works there and he's a student.
Yeah, she
So
works there. Yeah,
and that's another layer of the privilege thing, I think. Yeah, because she's serving the
definitely.
students, right?
Yeah, exactly. So she works in the coffee shop. She's not a student, and it's this elite university. It's a fictional university, but it is, a private college. It's very expensive. And I mean, I went to Duke, so it was, pretty loosely based on my experience at Duke. And again, it's a fictional university, but like that was one reason I was really interested in that layer of privilege, like the student versus the not student, like the staff member on campus.
Right.
Because at Duke, there was this like really striking difference in how people related to each other, depending on whether they were like enrolled or in the faculty or on the staff, like, working in one of the coffee shops or one of the eating facilities or like, any of those other roles, like landscaping or in the bookstore. Like the there was a really it was almost like they were like in parallel worlds, but like weren't really didn't really have much crossover. And so I really wanted to explore that too. And so Stasia in Privilege is a student. She's a student at a community college nearby, but she's grappling with like struggling to even pay her class, pay for her classes out of pocket. So like she's not taking out student loans. She's paying like a few $100s a credit and just trying to scrape by so that she can actually afford her nursing degree. And so that's in stark contrast to the students at this college who she serves coffee to every day, um, who are at this college that costs like 50,000 a year or something, without kind of blinking an eye. And so she's very aware of their difference in economic status. Like that's very clear to her, but I think it's the students are kind of oblivious to it. In the way that we are. Like, I mean, when I was at Duke, like I was completely oblivious to how much a credit cost, my family. Like I knew it was just being taken care of. And that, I mean, and granted, it was like, whether it was scholarship money or student loans, like a lot of us, I mean, people, there is a privilege that comes with just like knowing people are like it's being worked out for you,
Yeah.
like even if you worked hard to get there, it's like, I'm here, but like now it's just going to be taken care of and I'm going to get a degree. And you get you get that benefit. And it really is it's like a beautiful thing, but it's easy to take for granted when you just get to focus on your studies because you don't have to worry about the money part.
Mhm. Yeah, you're not thinking about it while you're in college per se, like some people like Stasia might be. Um,
Yeah, the educational privilege. Someone put it that way recently. I liked that.
Also, it mentions that B was a little bit concerned about attending this college specifically because it was in the South. Do you want to talk about your placement of that and why you chose for the college to be a Southern college?
Yeah, I chose it because that's where I had spent most of my time, and I didn't. I felt like I really could get my head around the like the Southern elite university. I feel like I got that, like I understood it. Whereas I think like the Northern elite university felt really different to me. I didn't. I mean, I went to law school at Yale, so like I did have that experience, but I didn't. That was a graduate school experience, first of all, which is really, I think, different than an undergraduate experience. So I wasn't really sure what an undergraduate experience at an elite Northern university um would look like. I mean, I imagine probably pretty similar, but it's just seemed, they say like write what you know. And I felt a lot more confident setting the story in the South than in the North. But I didn't want all of the characters to be from the South because this would be the kind of school where there are students who come from all over, like it draws students internationally. And so while I knew I wanted 3 women to tell their versions and really wanted all 3 of them to kind of come at it from really different experiences and backgrounds, I knew at least one of them I did not want to be local or even regional. And so B became that character who comes, who went to boarding school in New England and really hasn't spent much time in the South at all, and comes down specifically for this justice program that is it's called the Justice Program that's at Carter, this university, because she's been exposed to it and heard about it and is excited about it. So she comes down as a partial scholarship student to go there.
I love how thoroughly you've created this university where it like sounds like it could be a real place that we would all be familiar with. So
Thank you.
You talked about kind of your experiences in law with abuse cases, and then I think you said it was domestic abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your experiences out of Southern College. Was this particular issue or case based on a certain case, or was it kind of a conglomeration of things that you were familiar with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a conglomeration. I mean, I think over my time in both college and law school, of course, I had like friends who dealt with, like I had personal ties to sexual assault experiences. And most of those were really talked about like behind closed doors, it was like a secret kind of thing. And it's interesting because like I said, I mean, I was writing this during the Me Too movement, where I think a lot of this was an upheaval, like how people talk about sexual assault. And there was a lot more like acceptance of talking about it openly. And really, I mean, this novel set in 2017, which is really like kind of the heyday of the Me Too movement. So all this is happening like while that's also going on off campus. So I think I was in school in a different time in that sense. But I think what I have learned, especially talking to people who work on colleges, both before and after the publication of this book, is that, unfortunately, a lot of the same problems still exist. Like the Me Too movement didn't end sexual assault. It's just kind of made it more acceptable to, I think, talk about publicly on some level, but the issues are still there. I think one thing, that I did have this one experience in college that always kind of bothered me. Like I still think about it. I mean, I've thought about it for years, and may have, I haven't really thought about it this way, but may have actually been the seedling for this story, which is, an acquaintance of mine was, she was living in the dorm on campus and got up in the middle of the night to go to the hall bathroom. So, these dorms where people share a bathroom. And she got attacked by someone in the stall who had a knife and attacked her sexually, like a little pocket knife, and attacked her sexually. And she got away, and it was enough of a, like immediately the campus police were called and showed up, and there was sort of a hunt, like a manhunt, because this person was, no, sorry, he was not wearing any kind of facial covering. So there was this kind of manhunt, and so it was public enough, and this was in the middle of the night, but in college, everybody's awake all the time. So like there was enough of a kind of like a scene that this was very public, that this had happened to her. So while things can happen kind of behind closed doors or after a party, and then there's whispers and not many people know about it, like this was not private at all. Even if she would have wanted it to be, like it wasn't. Everybody knew. And so since everybody knew, a meeting was summoned of the next day or two, of everyone who lived in this dorm, and also anyone else who wanted to come. So there were like I don't know, I picture the room now in my memory. It's like over 100 people. I mean, there were a ton of people in the room, men and women, like students, deans, all these people in the room to talk about what had happened and campus safety and how to make sure it didn't happen again. And by this point, because I knew her well enough to know that she knew who had done it. Like she identified the person, and he was a student and he lived in the same dorm, which makes sense. That's how he was in the dorm when the doors locked. So I knew that she had identified this person and that he was a student. But everyone didn't know that. Everyone there didn't know that. And but sure, I think the deans would have, like at this point, you know, the faculty in the room would have known that. So anyway, all of this is to say, during this meeting, the speeches, the assurances, the tenor of the meeting was all about outsiders. It was all about like, how do we make sure people from outside in Durham don't sneak into the dorm and do this to us? Like, how do we like make sure your key cards are working? Don't let anyone follow you in who doesn't live here. And I was sitting there thinking like, but he did live here. Like no one in the room wants to acknowledge like, this is an inside job. Like this is someone who is probably in the room right now. But like, that was not something that that they wanted to face, or at least wanted to say aloud. So it was much easier to imply that it was some, dark figure in the night who wasn't a student who had snuck in. And it's funny because at the time I said that, like I stood up in the room and said that because I was that kind of college student.
That's awesome.
I was like a little much. And a fraternity, like the fraternity president got very upset and started yelling. And then like there had to be an intervention, calm everyone down. So basically that was the end of the meeting. It was like, didn't end well. It was very tense. And I think that experience has like stayed with me for a long time because, in a way that little story is like also the theme of this book. It's like, a lot of times it's like we want justice, but only if it doesn't actually affect this other thing that we really need to keep intact, whatever this other thing is.
Your reputation.
Sorry.
Or your circle or whatever it is.
Yeah. Sorry, that was a long answer, but
no, thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a really stressful environment to be in, especially as a college student when you're trying to learn your way around and everything. So it really speaks to how much, how true this book rings when you're reading it, because you experience different sides of all of these stories.
yeah.
Was that something that did you find it really difficult to write about these things? I don't, again, if this is too personal of a question, just, was it difficult for you to write about these things, or did you find it empowering to write about these things?
Yeah, good question. So I loved the, I think in writing fiction, one challenge of writing fiction and fun thing about writing fiction is really trying to embody your characters, and feel what they're feeling. And I always try to do that. And I think so for that reason, yeah, like writing the assault scenes was kind of terrible. But writing the empowering scene, like where she's taking back her power, that was like really fun. Maybe fun's the wrong word, but like it was, it felt good. It felt good for me in the same way that it felt good for Annie. Because she has these moments in the book where she does try to take back her power. Like she writes her version of the event. She gets her op-ed out there so that people can read what happened to her. She, and I won't give spoilers away, but she finds her way of trying to feel agency and dignity again. And I really wanted to give her that in the story. It was really important to me that she found her way to that. Because part of the story was always going to be like, the university not being able to give her what she wanted. But yeah, the rape scene itself was not fun to write, obviously. And, but I basically sat down. I mean, I knew it was going to be hard to write. I knew I had to write it. And so I kind of, I set out, I knew it didn't like sneak up on me. Like I was like, this morning, this is going to be the day that I write this scene. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to go, do something nice and easy.
Wholesome. Yeah.
um, so yeah, so that's what I did. And I think, there's I took a class earlier this year, just a pandemic writing class on, there's a woman who taught a class on like writing traumatic experiences, like when you write that, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, like how to do it. And she talked a lot about like taking care of yourself physically. So noticing, I mean, if you're writing something that's really hard for you to write, like you may start to have a physical reaction, like your heart starts racing, or you get short of breath, or you just have sort of like a fight or flight response. Um, and she just talked about noticing it and breathing through it. And then when you like take care of yourself as needed. So if you finish, writing whatever it is, or your writing session, like don't just push ahead. Like I got to get back to work, but like take what you need, go on a walk, lie down, like make some tea. And I thought it was, those are small things, but I think they're really nice tips for people who are writers when they're thinking about writing things that are difficult. And yeah, I was glad to have gotten those tips from her. Just in case I ever do revisit, a difficult topic like this. I think they're great ideas.
I think that's really great to share too, is because if you're dealing with something, it's important to take time to think about it and recover from it and not just push it aside. And you know,
Yeah,
especially as a writers, you have to most stories have something traumatic or difficult in them. So I'm sure that occurs with other books as well.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Another question that I want to move away from that just a little bit, but not too much. Annie also has a lot of scars, I believe, on her legs from a burn incident. Is that right?
Yeah.
And is that are you drawing parallels to others like new scars internally that she may be getting,
That's
or
so
was
interesting.
it kind of unrelated?
Well, that I love that. No, sometimes people ask me a question like that, and I think I want to say yes because that would make me seem very smart.
Good question.
I love that literary analysis, but I wish I had thought of that. What I was really so Annie had this burn accident when she was 13, and so she has scars on her legs. And when the novel opens, she's starting her sophomore year in college, and she's had surgery to get the scars removed. So her legs really look, in her own mind, they look much better and more appealing than they ever have since she was, in this kind of adult body. And so she's experimenting with a new style, new words of dressing. So she, like, for a long time, she was covering up her scars by wearing jeans and long pants, and now she's willing to bare her legs. And so the reason I think this is relevant to the story is that she's experimenting with a new kind of way of dressing, which, as we all know, I think like a lot of times when things like assault happen, like victims can end up blaming themselves for what they, like how they looked or what they were doing, right? So like, I shouldn't have been wearing that, or I shouldn't have been drinking that, or I shouldn't have been out at that time, right? And I think this was Annie's version of that. Like, she's thinking, oh, if I hadn't actually been, she blames herself, like I was too vain and I got the surgery, and then I started wearing like short skirts, and maybe that's why it happened to me, like that kind of mental gymnastics that I think people do, to take on the blame. And I think it's a really normal thing to do, because in a way, it's like, of course we look for control, because it's like, because if we controlled it, if we're the reason that it happened, then we can prevent it from happening again. So it's like, I think it's a really natural thing to think, well, what can I do so that it doesn't happen again? And you think, well, maybe it's how I dressed. Okay, so if I just don't dress like that, it won't happen again. I think it's like a really normal thing to do. But anyway, that was her version of that.
Yeah, that seems like it's kind of like it gives us a little bit more, because it's like a more defined difference between how she dressed one way or the other. It like lets you into her mind about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really interesting. It really draws you in when it starts off with talking about how she's feeling the breeze on her legs or something like that for the first time, and how excited she was about that. Um, there's a couple questions from the audience for you.
Oh, great.
Um, let's see. Um, we hosted a workshop a while back about writing about violence. This is Sharon at the shop, and the importance of having the reader be invested in the character before you spring that on them. And did you
Mm,
consciously foster that kind of emotional investment when you were writing?
mm. Yeah, I think I really think, like, with any kind of storytelling, whether it's violence or not, I think you want the reader to care about, the character before they can really take on any kind of conflict on behalf of that character, right? So, like, if you open a book with someone facing something really difficult, you can do that, but I think it may not resonate as much with a reader as it would if they got to know that character a little bit, and then really and then because they got to know them and cared about them, actually felt the same thing when that character faced the conflict. So I think, yeah, I definitely consciously did that, because I think it's kind of like, it's why we, like, behind the stories that we read, they're the mechanics that aren't as sexy to talk about. But, like, those mechanics work for a reason, and it's why we like really good storytelling. And because if we kind of step back and analyze it, we see, like, oh, I became invested in this character, and then when this thing happened to them, I cared. Um, and so, yeah, I wanted us to get to know Annie a little bit, and get to know, like, what this year meant to her, what this sophomore year meant to her before we saw it be snatched away, because then it stings more, and then hopefully it stings a little bit more. Like, we get to feel a little bit more what it would be like to have been her, to have gone in with all this hope, and then just have the rug kind of ripped out from under her by this traumatic thing happening.
Um, yeah, I've also heard people talk about how the you have to kind of, as a reader, grant some trust in the author that that violence is going to, getting through that as a reader is going to pay off in some way for you if you continue reading the book. So having that connection probably helps with that.
Yes. Oh, I love that interpretation. Right. Like, I feel like very few of us want to read gratuitous violence. Like, if we want to read something that's really hard to read, we have to, I think at least I want to trust the author um to be doing it for a reason, like, to be taking me somewhere that's going to be meaningful and have some kind of resolution, even if it's not like a happy ending, but to have some kind of bigger purpose than just the violence. I don't know if anyone here has read A Little Life, um, but has anyone read A Little Life? A Little Life is a wonderful novel, and a very, very violent novel. And it is the only novel that sometimes I'll say it's the only novel I've thrown across the room. Literally threw it across the room because of what we're talking about. Like, she is in the author, was putting this character through so much physical violence that I got very angry at her. And ultimately, I think it's because she was such a good writer, because I cared so much. She had successfully made me care so much about this character that I was just horrified.
Is
But
that
it's a great,
Hanya?
yeah. Yeah. Hanya
Hanya.
Yanagihara, I
Yeah, I
think. I'm
wasn't
not sure
sure
how,
how to
if I'm
say that.
pronouncing her last name right either. I can see it spelled out, Yanagihara.
Let me put that in the chat just in case anyone's interested.
It's so good. It's a really great novel, but it does have a lot of really intense violence in it.
There's a article about it in the chat if anybody wants to check it out. There's another question from Clista. I'm not sure what this question's referring to because I haven't read the whole book yet. Anything about the professor? Is there a professor that's kind of like a main character in the book, or?
Yeah. Clista, was there something specific about the professor
She
you were
just
wondering
wanted
about?
to know more about the professor.
There is a professor. He runs the justice program in the book. And I think hopefully this will maybe be a little bit of a spoiler, but he's like the professor who is like maybe being inappropriate or maybe not, and it's kind of hard to tell, and it's in the gray area. And I wanted to include that character because I thought it represented like another important feature of these kind of stories where it's like, sometimes things aren't, I mean, if Annie's sexual assault is already a little bit gray, at least not from her perspective, but like on paper, when other people are reading about it, they're like, oh, I don't know what I think about that. Like it's in the gray zone in that sense from an outsider's perspective. I thought the professor is even more gray because it's like until the end, in which case stuff becomes a little more clear. But like for much of the story, it's like, is he? And I think there is a lot of times, and I have had these experiences. I've definitely had these. I think probably many of us have, where it's like, is this thing or is it that thing? Like I can't really tell by the way someone is acting. And it's like, if it's this thing, that's probably inappropriate. But if it's that thing, maybe it's okay. And it's like kind of trying to figure out which side of the line someone is falling on. And yeah, so the professor is there to represent that dynamic. And I won't give away the spoiler of how that ends, but that's his role in the book.
You're so good at talking about this without giving anything away.
Thank you.
Even more curious about it. That was most of the questions I had was mostly just about the characters and how you came up with this. What kind of, can I ask also, besides your personal experience, did you have to do additional research for this? And how did you go about doing that? Did you have to interview people? How did you do that?
Yeah, so a friend from law, because I had gone to law school, I, have like a network of lawyers in my social community. And so I reached out to them and just said, who is anyone working on like campus cases like this? And it turns out a woman I'm friends with, she had taken on representing students, and mainly students accused of assault in cases like this. And so she became a really critical resource. We had some really long conversations about the dynamics, and she sent me a few case files. So in the middle of Privilege, there is a case file. I'm just gonna try to pull it up. So it looks kind of like, it's like this official looking like case file.
Well, very cool.
That has the findings of, the committee or whoever made the decision. And this is based on real case files that I read that my friend Naomi sent me. So that was like a deep dive I did researching those. And these case files can be really long, like hundreds of pages, and they interview friends and they like take people's text messages and they print out all the text messages. And so that was one level of research. And then another level, I mean, like I said, I went to college many years ago. I graduated in 2004. So it's been longer than that, 17 years since I was in college. And so I really needed to make sure that writing about college students, I was like capturing what it's really like to be a college student, not right now, but in 2017, like much more recently. So I had some college students I hired some college students to read a pretty early draft.
Oh,
and
that's
just
great.
flag things for me that were not, that were like not timely. So a lot of the things they flagged were things like social media. Like they're like, I maybe hadn't included as much of that as I could have, or fashion, like uh one of them told me that no one would wear this one outfit that I had one of the characters wearing.
I would have the same
So
problem.
that was really valuable.
How cool that you thought to
Mhm.
ask them though, because I mean, a lot of people don't do stuff like that where they're like, I just want to make sure this is as realistic as it possibly can be. That's really great.
Totally. Thank you.
I went back to college 8 years after my first college degree, and I have to say it was
Wow.
quite a shock culturally from the first time. Um,
I
so
bet.
yeah, I appreciate that too because I completely understand what that was like to see the differences. Um, we have one more question in the chat here. Um, Sharon's asking what's next for you if you're working on another novel. I know you have one, Palm Beach, is
Mm.
coming out
Mhm.
in August. You want to talk about that one?
Sorry, I took a sip of water. Yeah, this is Palm Beach, or this is the galley of Palm Beach. That's what the cover is going to look like.
Lovely.
And it comes out in August. Yeah, so very excited about this. It's the story of a caterer to a billionaire family in Palm Beach. He runs their estate, and he and his wife, their lives get enmeshed with this billionaire family's lives, and so it's the story of that relationship, and it's juicy if you like reading about billionaires and the beach.
That sounds awesome, especially for it to come out in August. How perfect is that?
Yeah, I think it's a good beach read. It'll be a good beach read.
Are you currently writing anything for after that? Because I know that means you've probably turned in most of your edits and everything. So is that too personal of a question?
Yeah, no, I am. Yeah, Palm Beach is done. It is actually like going to press and everything, so it's finished. And so I'm working on my fourth novel now, and it's still very early stages. So I'm not really, I don't even have much to say about it yet, but I am working on it.
Okay. Well, we'll look
Yeah,
forward to seeing what that one is too.
thanks.
Um, do you have a favorite one so far to write? Like, do you have one that's closest to your heart or that you enjoyed writing
Oh,
the most?
probably Palm Beach. Yeah, I loved writing Palm Beach. So my husband was an actor for many years, and
Cool.
we lived in New York, and he was an actor, which means he was also a caterer, because a lot of actors, when they're acting, they're catering. And all of our friends, or most of our friends, have also spent a lot of time catering. So I spent all these years hearing these really, I found very juicy stories about like them working for, I mean, we were in New York City, so it was like they were working in these Upper East Side penthouses for billionaires and politicians, and serving like, I don't know, Bono and princes, and like really, really big names. And so it was super fun for me to write this, because I got to like draw on all of that kind of juicy experience of being on the sidelines for all those years, and hearing from the catering staff about what it's like inside these events and inside these houses. Um, so yeah, that one was super fun to write.
It sounds like there's a lot of fun perspectives in that too.
Yeah, I hope so. I think so.
Um, I'll have to see about getting an arc for us to read that. um,
Totally.
so I don't have any more questions right now, but I think so. We'll call it there. But we had a really great time talking to you, and this book has been just really important to us, and it was important for us to talk about it. Was something that we just wanted to draw attention to as a bookshop as well. So thank you for your openness and talking about it and sharing your stories.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure. And yeah, I love being able to do stuff like this. So thanks for thinking of me.
Of course. And we have I think one of our staff members, Sharon, is a friend of the family or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we knew you a little bit, and she was like, we have to do this book. So there's Sharon.
My husband's cousin, Garyl's cousin.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, I know. I'm so glad you made that connection. That's awesome,
Family's the
Sherry.
best. Well, remember everyone that we have signed copies of Mary's book at the bookshop, which is where Sharon is right now. And if you're interested in picking one of those up for Mary, please do call us or email. And thank you for your wonderful questions. Everybody had great questions so far today. And it's been really fun talking to you, Mary.
Yes, thanks so much. Thanks everybody. Thanks for
All right.
coming.
Have a good
Have a great
afternoon. Bye,
have a great
everyone.
week. Bye.